Hi, I'm Kaylee, and today I'm going to tell you how to write a book review. In case you didn't know, Books for MKs is a charity that donates books to missionary kids all over the world. If you want to donate to the kids, you can do so at gofundme.com. There's a link down in the description, there's a button right up here, and a button at the end of this video where you can donate to the kids. Please be sure to click on that subscribe button and click on that little bell so you can be notified whenever I post a new video. About 3 or maybe 4 years ago, I posted a video about how I review books. And I was thinking it's probably time to update that. So let's go through my list of things that I look for when I'm thinking about how to write a book review, and see if any of them have changed over the last 3 or 4 years or however long it's been. So one of my old rules, and it's still my rule, is to be kind. That is always good advice no matter what you're doing. You don't need to attack the author. You can say that you didn't like the book, but you can do it in a polite and kind way. Another one of my old rules is to try to find at least one good thing in a book that you hated. So even if you hated everything about the book, try to look at it critically and just see, okay, is there at least one good thing about this book that I did enjoy or that I think is something good? And the next one is also about balance. Even in a book that you loved, find one thing that you didn't like. You want to be realistic and you want to have balance, and since no book is completely perfect, there might have been just one small thing that annoyed you or that you didn't like about the book. At least be looking for it, at least be on the lookout. Another thing that I always still look for is the author's background. Knowing something about the author can sometimes have a deep impact on how you think about the book. For instance, Dickens' father was thrown into debtor's prison, and being in debt and being thrown into debtor's prison features heavily in many of Dickens' novels. So knowing a little bit about Dickens' life then brings in a whole new level to his books. Sometimes this is important, and sometimes the author's background doesn't really influence your perception of the book. But especially when reading older books and classics, it can be really useful to know something about the author and the time period that they lived in. It's always a good idea to mention the genre and the intended audience of a book that you're reviewing. If I say that a book is children's fantasy, you immediately have an idea in your head about, what type of book I'm talking about. One very important thing to always include in your review is the setting. Some books have a setting that are so powerful and so iconic that they almost become like another character in the book. I think of like the creepy moors in Wuthering Heights, which has an influence on the entire story. The time period of the book is also extremely important to set the scene of what kind of environment our characters are living in. Another important aspect of your review is going to be the point of view, or the narrator. Who is telling the story? Is it being told in first person or in third person? Does the POV switch between characters? That's one of my personal pet peeves. I hate it when the POV switches between characters. Very few authors can pull this off, and it usually just gets on my nerves. A story can be drastically different depending on who is telling the story. Another major point, of course, is the plot. The plot is the bones of the story. We could have a wonderful setting and amazing characters, but if there is nothing happening in the plot, the story falls flat. There are two major things that I look for in the plot, and the first is pacing. Pacing means the flow of the story from action scenes with lots of suspension to more resting scenes where the characters can regroup and explain things before the next big action scene. There should be a natural flow between suspension and resolution throughout the story that rises and falls from scene to scene. The second thing that I look for is plot development. Is the plot fully developed, or are there rabbit trails all over the place that never get resolved? Are there a lot of loose ends hanging around at the end of the story? I like to see a plot that comes full circle where everything is developed and resolved. Another major aspect of every review and a major aspect of what I think of when I'm thinking what to write are, of course, the characters. I am a very character-driven reader, and so there are several key things that I look for in characters. Number one is character development. Do the characters change through the story? Do they grow and learn and become better people by the end? Or do they suffer and make bad decisions and then become villains by the end of the story? I don't really care which one they do, but they had better do something and change. They should develop and become different through their experiences of the story. The second thing I look for is, are the characters memorable? Are the characters just cardboard cutouts with painted on smiles? Or are they really people? Living, breathing, quirky, weird, massive, souled people. And the third thing I look for in characters is the complexity or the depth of the character. Do the characters have just a facade with a laundry list of characteristics? Or do they really have a personality? Do they have deep motivations that fuel the story? I love to see complex and balanced characters that remind me of real people and that remind me of myself. Next comes the writing, and I have a whole list of things that I look for in the type of writing in a book. The first thing I notice is the writing style. Is it formal, like Shakespeare? Is it informal, like Princess Diaries? Is it epistolary in the form of letters? Is it illustrated like a graphic novel or a manga? The next thing I look for is coherence and clarity. Does the writing make sense? Is it easy to understand? The next thing I look for is the writing concise? Does the writing ramble off into rabbit trails or include really long descriptive passages? Or does it say what needs to be said in a few powerful words? And connection. Do the ideas in the book connect? Or does the story meander around saying random things that don't connect and have no relation to one another? Originality. Does the author have some new ideas? Or do they maybe put a new spin on an old idea? Does the writing feel fresh? Or does it feel like a cookie cutter copy of every other book in that same genre? And I always look for the voice or the tone of the story. The author should have their own voice, their own way of writing, their own clever dialogue, their own witty narrative. Or does the writing feel fake and insincere? Next, I look for forcefulness and passion in the writing. The writing should make me feel something. The writing should make me think deeply about something. The forcefulness of the words should have an impact on the reader. And I look for fluidity. Does each sentence flow smoothly into the next and into the next scene? Does each paragraph and chapter flow naturally without awkwardly jarring me out of the story? The next thing I always look for throughout the whole story is the theme or the message of the story. Themes can be really deeply meaningful philosophies and beliefs like love conquers all, or money doesn't buy happiness. And then those truths are illustrated by what happens to the characters in the story. A theme is an underlying purpose that binds the story together. Sometimes the themes in a book are very clear and they're explained. Sometimes you have to really think about it and dig a little deeper to find a meaning behind what the author has written. The last thing I include in every review is how I was personally affected by the book. These are my personal feelings and reactions to the story. Sometimes I can tell that a book was well written and had good characters, but I just didn't enjoy it personally. Or I know that a book had problems with the writing and problems with the plot, but I don't care because I just loved it so much. And I was able to enjoy it despite its flaws. So my personal experience is kind of separate from the actual merits of the book. And that is how to write a book review. Some of those are the same as they were 3 or 4 years ago. Some of them are a little different, or I've tweaked them a little or changed things slightly through the years. Please leave me a comment down below and let me know, what are some things that you look for in a book when you're thinking about how to critique it and how to write a review. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and remember, the right book in the right hands at the right time can change the world.